Hi guys, welcome to Cake and Crime. My name is Emily and today's case is about a greedy wife who just wanted it all and took matters into her own hands. Just to put it out there, this is just information that I've gathered and I've put into one video for your entertainment purposes. This is just my personal opinion, so if you'd like to make your own opinion about the case, please feel free to do your own research. Also, just a disclaimer that this video contains violence, sexual abuse allegations and drug misuse. Now let's just jump into it. Today's case is about a woman called Ben Renick who murdered her husband, Ben Renick. Let's just go back to where they both met. They both attended the same high school. Lindley at the time was with someone else. Her boyfriend was in a band and Ben was actually the drummer for them. Lindley would actually watch them practice at Ben's house. They also hung out on other days, swimming and doing other activities. When Lindley was younger, she also suffered with an eating disorder and her mental health was actually quite bad. It started to deteriorate so badly that her mum went in and spoke to the school and actually managed to sort out where she was able to go in, where there was no one else but the two teachers that she needed to teach her for the 2 credits that she needed to pass. She graduated from high school and 2 weeks later moved to Jefferson City with her sister. She started her classes for massage therapy in the summer of 2006. There was a short summer break, but she went back after that to resume the year. In that year, she met a man by the name of Michael Humphrey. Now keep this name in mind as he'll be popping up more than once. The night before she was set to take her exam, Lindley actually found out that she was pregnant with her first child. She did take her massage therapy exam and actually passed, but this was only for a provisional licence and she needed to pass for a state licence. She was only a few weeks pregnant when the father of her child, Josh Hake, got into quite a serious car accident where he was arrested and sentenced for quite some time for the crime he'd committed. Lindley went on to have a little boy who she named Matthew. She raised him on her own, and when he was 10 months old, she decided to go back and get her licence for massage therapy, which she did actually achieve. Meanwhile, after Ben had graduated high school, he went on to work with his dad, Frank Renick. Frank owned a pet treat business, but from a very young age, Ben was very interested in snakes, and his fascination with them grew, and when he was old enough, he started a business and called it Renick Reptiles. Business wasn't booming, but it was enough to get himself by, while at the same time still working with his dad. Not long after, he started a relationship with Lindley, and Frank's business went down a bit. So Ben stepped back as he wanted to concentrate on his own business. He started upping his production, he started to sell a little bit more, and working full-time on his own business to try and build it up. Ben had started making a name for himself. He was actually one of the few in the business at the time. Ben was able to acquire a lot of snakes not a lot of people were able to get. So in a way, he had a business and reptiles that were very unique. Ben started to breed some of the snakes and was able to produce first genetics of these snakes. Ben successfully bred T-positive albino green anacondas. Ben had the only female in the world to his knowledge and of that size to breed and reproduce. The babies of that litter were bred with another very rare genetic morph of anaconda, again being the only one in the world, and to have a pair of these babies would be selling up to $25,000. So as you can tell, Ben did quite well for himself. Now, do you remember me talking about Michael Humphrey? Well, he had actually connected again with Lindley in 2009 via Facebook. He just sent a message basically saying how beautiful her son was and that he'd seen pictures through mutual friends. Shortly after, Lindley and Michael started a relationship. It was a very toxic relationship from the start and truthfully were really bad for each other. Michael was high on meth and Lindley was always high on prescription drugs. Michael was high on meth and Lindley was high on prescription drugs. They were not in their right mind half the time, and I can't help but feel sorry for poor little Matthew. Lindley came to her senses one day. She was in work, halfway through a massage, according to her. She sobered up and came to and realised that she had no recollection of dropping her son off at daycare, driving to work, or even the start of the day. In truth, I think she scared herself shitless. After work that day, she phoned her dad and told him absolutely everything that went on. She moved in with him that same day, where she went on the road to recovery. She left Michael and moved to Colombia, where she managed to sober up and get her life back on track. This is the part of the story where we get to where Ben and Linley actually reconnect. Linley had put a questionnaire out on Facebook, one of them random but somehow enjoyable questionnaires, and Ben had answered a question on there, and they just both continued to message each other from there. They were catching up after all these years, telling each other where they were in life and what they'd done. Shortly after, they went on a date, where they watched a movie, hung out, and just generally enjoying each other's company. She said he was very respectful and truly loved what a gentleman he was. They learned quite quickly that they had a couple of things in common. They liked to watch horror movies, they had the same taste in music, and both loved a good book to read. Not long into the relationship, she was thinking of moving away with her sister and brought this up into conversation with Ben. He jokingly but seriously said, "No, don't do that, move in with me." She wanted to, but in all honesty, it wasn't just her, which he accepted, but he had to get to know Matthew first. And the first night he stayed over at Ben's, Ben had a room ready, special made for Matthew to go in and sleep in. Linley was doing her normal routine with him, and when reading him a story, Ben was right at the end of the bed with his head laid down listening too. Life was absolutely bliss for them. Linley opened a spa which she called Essentia, and Ben was a reptile breeder and had his own facility. He was very successful as a Renick Reptiles, and around the time of his death, he was due to receive $1.2 million payout from hockey player Robin Lenoir. Linley and Ben had had a little girl who they named Amelia. The year Amelia was born, sadly, they both lost a parent. Ben's dad died and Linley's mum died. Side note, Ben's dad, Frank, and I won't go into too much detail because as you will tell, it's a different story in itself, but Frank had committed suicide to be able to keep the farm and the family. So as you could tell, emotions were clearly at the highest, especially that year for both of them. That year, Ben set up a beneficiary to where his daughter Amelia and Linley, upon his death, would receive his assets. He also got life insurance worth of $1 million. The only way this was paid out though, and this is Missouri law, but it states that if you are found guilty of harming the individual, that you cannot benefit from their death financially, and rightfully so and all. They also lived on Ben's family's farm, which had a net worth of close to $80,000. Ben and Linley had tied the knot in April 2014. Life was all good for the pair until around 2017, when they started to have little arguments that went on to more and just got worse and worse as time went on. They were mainly about financial issues. They had debt collectors at the door, the landlord for non or late payments, no money to pay the spa employees, and this was all Linley's doing. She had a lot of her spending. It was later found out that a lot of the money was going into advertising, and the man responsible for this was a man by the name of Eric Bremer, who Linley had an affair with from around December 2016, and it ended in September 2017. No wonder why all the money was disappearing into thin air. This wasn't the only person that she had an affair with. Another man called Brandon Blackwell, which is another key person in this case. Their affair began only a couple of weeks before Ben Renick was murdered, so again, keep him in mind. One day, Linley had come into work and her manager of her spa, Ashley Shaw, had saw that she seemed to be upset, so she went and asked her what was wrong. And Linley went on to tell her something that she hadn't said about Ben before. Just a warning before I start, but this is about SA allegations, and if it's something that you'd not like to hear at this time, I'll put the timestamp to where this bit is ended. Anyway, she had claimed that she'd woken up to Ben on top of her and inside of her while she was asleep, claiming he'd raped her. Ashley was obviously very shocked and consoled her boss. A few days after the allegations were made, she went back into work and told Ashley that they were working through it. Ben had sent a message to Linley, which she then showed Ashley, but it read, "I'm sorry, those nights shouldn't have happened, and they never will again. I wasn't mad at you for not having sex with me, but it doesn't matter because I made you feel that way. I'm sorry. Not long after, she began to say to Ashley that she wanted a divorce, but at the same time, she couldn't afford one. She knew full well that Ben had the funds to divorce her and the means to be able to take the children full time. She was afraid to lose the children, so divorcing him wasn't an option. She then asked Ashley if she'd help murder Ben, which Ashley was taken back at first, but then Ashley agreed to help her as she felt sorry for the abuse that she'd suffered, or what she thought was suffering from Ben. Just a side note, that Ashley Shaw was someone that Linley had previously worked with at a different spa, and when Linley went and opened her own spa, Ashley willingly went with her and became her manager. The pair had discussed a few ways to get rid of Ben, but they all seemed quite unlikely that he'd actually get away with it. Linley then asked Ashley if she was able to get hold of a gun, to which Ashley didn't know anyone who could get hold of a gun for her. They both tried thinking of different ways to kill Ben and get away with it. Linley then thought about trying to poison Ben and asked Ashley if she knew anyone who could get hold of any pills, enough to be able to fatally poison him. She said she might be able to help with that. They both started researching Google, searching things like how many tablets it'd take to kill someone. They carried on their research and came across some tablets that Ashley knew her husband can get hold of. So when Ashley went home that night, she asked her husband if she could get hold of them, saying that Linley liked the tablets and that she wanted to use them for fun. So him not actually knowing the real intention to why she wants these tablets, he then supplied her with 10 to 15 tablets. On the 24th of May 2017, Ashley then gave them straight to Linley, which she later then blended up that night and laced Ben's protein drink, taking full advantage knowing full well he drinks them, and she's his wife. Why would he need to worry about receiving drinks from her? She made it, and she made herself one, obviously without the pills in. They both drank them and went on doing their normal night. Later on, Ben started to violently throw up and he felt really, really sick. Linley, being the deceiving person that she is, started to copy his symptoms and act like they both got food poisoning. She was in a different bathroom on the other side of the house, so it's easy to lie about. The next morning, Linley had messaged Ashley quite early in the morning saying he was very sick, threw up, but he's still alive. Linley had got up, got dressed and went straight to Ashley's house. They almost immediately got in their cars and went to the spa. Meanwhile, Ben was at home trying to recuperate from Linley's first attempt on his life. He sent a couple messages to his friend Chase Baker saying, "I have a fun story, food poisoning is dumb, or just being poisoned." Chase replied with, "Laugh my ass off, I literally think you were poisoned at this point." Ben sent back, "Agreed, or it was Linley all along." Chase replied, "Laugh my ass off, why would she do that to herself as well? Maybe a customer gave it to you and laughed because they disliked their service. I don't think so somehow." When they reached the spa, they went in and started to talk about why the tablets didn't work and why he wasn't dead. She was extremely annoyed and still wanted him dead. She again brought up the gun idea and thought of her ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey. Again, he's popping up. Just a side note here, Linley was very familiar and she knew how to handle a weapon. She used to go to the shooting range for fun when she was in a previous relationship with Michael. The gun she'd used to shoot was a Springfield Armory 40 caliber XD series, so again she knowing full well how to use a weapon. They then started some research in finding out where Michael lived and where he worked to track him down to ask him face to face if he'd help her. May 2017, they found his address and work address. It was only about 25-30 minutes drive from Missouri, so they got in the car and drove down there to see him. They didn't contact him, they just showed up to his address, and when they got there, Michael wasn't there, so they moved on to where he was supposedly working, but they found out that he wasn't actually working and hadn't been working there for a long time. They were running out of ideas where to find him, so they went back to his home address, and lo and behold, he was sat in his car on his driveway. Before Linley got out, she said to Ashley, "If anyone asks, he's here to help you with an audio system." She got out and went towards Michael, who was visibly shocked as it had been quite some time since they'd seen each other. They went inside and spoke to each other, and at first it was just small talk like how each other had been and what they were doing now, etc. She asked him at first if she'd help him with an audio system for her friend Ashley. She quickly moved on to talk about her relationship with Ben. She said it was really bad and he constantly was SAing her. Michael again was very shocked and felt really bad for her. She then proceeded to tell him that she'd already made an attempt on Ben's life and that it didn't work, and had actually asked him why it didn't work, to which he wasn't quite sure. She asked him if he could help and he said he'd think about it. Before she left, she said to him that he should come up to the spa and have a massage. A few days later, Michael turned up at the spa for an appointment that had been previously booked, and when he was in the room, he supplied her with a gun, but not just any gun, the Springfield Armory 40 caliber XD series, which, as we know already, she truly knew how to handle this weapon. When handing her the gun, on the pretenses for her protection, he said no one should be going through a thing like this, to which she replied, "I don't think I can do it," suggesting for him to do it. He of course said no. He got his massage and they were there about an hour all in all, and then he went home. When Michael had left, Lindley had told Ashley that he had connections with the Mexican mafia, when in all honesty, I don't think he had connections with Mexican food, let alone the mafia. But she said she couldn't take this route as she didn't have the funds that they were asking for, Ashley not knowing that Lindley had already been supplied with a gun. And if you haven't already guessed, you can just tell the amount of lies that just spew out of her mouth. Speaking of lies, here's some more of hers. A few days before Ben's murder, Lindley and Ben started to get on a hell of a lot better, cause that's not sus. She was sending over flirty messages, nudes, and even planning a date for the day of his murder. Obviously, to use it as an alibi, she planned a date during the day and was going to message saying that she was feeling ill and couldn't make it, and then asked Ben if he could pick up the kids from school. Then the school would then have to phone her, where she'd be at the spa, giving herself a complete alibi of her whereabouts at the time of Ben's murder. I am also going to be reading this message to put it out there that Ben was trying to work through things, and on the 17th of May 2017, he decided to compromise with her and said, which I think is very fair of him, the person Chuck that falls in with his message as I'm just about to read is Ben's trustee, and it read, "Chuck wants to give it 3 more months and see where we are. I told him you wanted to keep pushing it forward and he said let's just do it. He doesn't want us to spend all our money pushing it forward. He has virtually no faith in Robin right now because Chuck is officially asking me to back out at this point, and I can't argue. Robin is a lot of talk and not a lot of showing me anything. We're now at the point of today's case where the murder of Ben Renick takes place. 8th of June 2017, Lindley showed up again unannounced to Michael's, on her own this time, and she said that Ben and herself had been fighting again, and if she didn't have anyone to do this, that she needed to go back and get some clothes. While they were doing this, Lindley had asked Michael one last time if she killed Ben, offering a very large sum of money, but Michael wasn't interested and didn't want to be involved in something like that. She then claimed that she was only going to talk to Ben and state that she wanted a divorce, grab some stuff and go and stay with her dad. But Lindley had other ideas and planned to murder Ben. The murder was supposed to happen in the morning, but Michael had run into some car trouble and needed a jump start, to where a few of Lindley's colleagues came up to the rescue. Ashley Shaw was one of them, and they all went back to the spa. Lindley then asked Ashley if she could message Ben from her phone from the spa, giving her a digital trace and an alibi. She had then left the spa with Michael up to the reptile facility. Ashley took a little while to send the message, but when she finally plucked the courage up, she sent the message via Facebook, and it said, "I'm not feeling well, I'm gonna lie down, can you pick the kids up?" But when she did, herself and her colleague Rachel Hunt, who knew nothing up until that day, both went to the bank and a convenience store to get themselves on camera, giving themselves an alibi as they didn't want to be blamed for anything. Meanwhile, Lindley and Michael were on their way to the reptile facility, and in Michael's car, he noticed he was starting to run out of gas. And although the facility wasn't that far from where she worked, it wasn't enough petrol to see the journey through, which she was pretty annoyed at this, because she had to pay for the gas, which obviously left a trace, which wasn't far from the location and the time of her husband's murder. They finally got to the reptile facility, and as they pulled up, they see Ben taking the rubbish out. He was surprised to see her, as she never said anything about coming by. He said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" She explained it away by saying that Michael was an old high school friend, and he was here to inquire about some snakes, which should have been the first red flag, as Ben and Lindley went to high school together. Now, I don't know how big schools are in America, but I'm pretty sure he'd remember in some way, shape or form who Michael was. She then took the bag off of him and then put it in the outside bin, while Ben and Michael went straight into the reptile facility. Ben went straight down the hallway to his office, where he had to pass probably a couple of hundred snakes. Michael stayed at the beginning, actually too afraid to pass them. This was the point where Lindley had rushed in, literally guns blazing. She had shot Ben about 4 times, and at first Ben was standing and obviously through being shot collapsed to the floor. She stopped shooting and went pretty much face to face and proceeded to shoot him a further 4 times downwards into his body, one of them being point blank in his head. Ben had had multiple shots to the back, elbow, shoulders and head. She tried to pick up as many shell casings as she could, but she didn't get them all. And who said romance was dead? The time of Ben's murder was around 4 p.m. on the 8th of June 2017. Michael said when she moved closer in to shoot, he had left the facility and went into his car. He sat there for a few minutes in complete shock. In his mind, he was only there to act as a bodyguard while she told Ben that she wanted a divorce. In a state of shock, Lily had rushed into the car and screamed go, to which Michael didn't really think about it and just hightailed them out of there. In the car journey on the way home, she said that she felt sick and smoked a few cigarettes. They made it back to the spa where Lindley had rushed in and went straight to the back. She said to Rachel to get out of the way and make sure that Michael doesn't see you. He doesn't know that you know. So Rachel did as she was told and went out back. In the meantime, Lindley had Ashley scrub her down. Now at first, while reading this, I thought, what a lazy sod. But actually thinking about it, firing a gun will leave gunshot residue. So anything that she touches then has that trace on. As Ashley was washing down Lindley, Michael had come into the back and said, "Does she know? Did you tell her?" To which she replied no, and he left quicker than you could say his name. Michael got back in his car and had no intention of seeing Lindley ever again. He was halfway home when the gun that she had used to murder her husband had slid out from underneath the passenger seat, clearly cacking his pants as the gun was used in a murder. He took it home, wrapped it up, put it in a case, and then he took it to his girlfriend's mum's house to hide. Back at the spa, Lindley went on to tell the events that happened, but not the actual events that happened, just Lindley bullshit facts. She told the same story, but with Michael as the shooter. Later on that day, the school had phoned her up saying that no one had come to pick the kids up, so she went to school, picked them up and went on to the reptile facility with their kids, knowing full well that she had just shot him dead. When she got there, she mysteriously found Ben dead. She then went on to phone his brother, Ben Renick. Sam had showed up and see his little brother was dead. He automatically assumed that it was his snakes, not the snake that was in his bed. Police were obviously called to the scene where most of them believed that Ben had been killed by a snake, until Lindley had piped up and said that his snakes wouldn't have done that, but they're all still on the lookout just in case. I mean, could you blame them? Everyone was taken in for questioning that night, and one police officer, who ended up being the lead investigator, Devin Forst, noticed that Lindley had thrown up at the side of the courthouse and thought that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. About a week later, she puts her foot in it as she was again talking about Ben's murder with Ashley and casually said in their conversation, "I didn't think I could do it." Ashley was obviously instantly confused, but called her out on it and said, "But you said Michael killed Ben." She then went on to tell her that Michael had gotten scared and backed out at the last minute, and that she in fact shot Ben herself multiple times in the back. Not long after this, Ashley left the spa and went on to work somewhere else. She also went on to attend college. She had also gotten married and carried on with life, trying her best to forget everything that had happened. Lindley had carried on her relationship with Brandon Blackwell and in fact went on to have his child. They called him Jackson. Much like every relationship that she gets into, Brandon was no different and again was very toxic, and they were just better being apart. He was actually quite violent and controlling of Lindley. He did love her in his own way, but not the right way. By then, the case of Ben Renick had been passed over to Sergeant Nathaniel Schaefer, so it was him who had received the call asking for him to come to Boone County Jail as Brandon had some valuable information about the murder of Ben Renick. She ended up having to get a protection out on him as he was just so violent. Brandon couldn't help himself when it came to her, and he repeatedly broke the terms of the protection order and was arrested a few times for stalking. Eventually, the law had caught up with him and he was brought to the Boone County Jail to serve time for his crimes. But his parents weren't just about to let their son go down without a fight. He was asking for leniency in the crimes that he had committed for this valuable information. Schaefer said he'd do all he could to help reduce his sentence, but he wasn't promising anything. Brandon then proceeded to tell him all that happened that day of Ben Renick's murder and who done it. If it wasn't for Brandon Blackwell trying to use her as a get out of jail free card, I honestly can't say that this case wouldn't have so easily turned into a cold case. The most ironic part of this is that Brandon didn't actually get no deal and he was sentenced to a full sentence, so he did his missus over, who he claimed to be madly in love with. Funny sort of love that is. After hearing the story, Schaefer had paid a visit to Ashley Shaw, where to begin with she stuck with her original story. That was until Schaefer had told her that they have evidence linking her to the attempt on Ben Renick's life the first time round. Hey, sorry I ran out of cake video, so now you have me to deal with. The joys. Anyway, Ashley was offered a proffer agreement, but only if she was 100% truthful. And just like that, Ashley was telling the same events that Brandon was. They tried many attempts to contact Michael but failed to do so, as well, as most criminals go, they don't like the sound of police. So he evaded police as much and as long as he could. Clearly weren't slick enough though, because he ended up himself in jail on a drugs charge. Schaefer got whiff of Michael in jail and went on his merry way down to offer him a proffer agreement, where he'd get a lesser sentence that was set out, but again, he had to be 100% truthful, just like Ashley, and if they were found to be lying, they would face their original consequence. They both took the stand against Lindley and told the truth of what exactly happened. The jury see straight through her and believed the people that cooperated with the evidence. Sam Renick had made a witness statement and revealed some quite interesting facts that weren't actually mentioned during the trial. But he said that Lindley had sold the farm that they had lived on, the farm that had been in their family for 40 years. Their mum had died in that house and they'd promised to keep it in their family, and their dad had killed himself just to keep it in the family. And then she came along, killed Ben and sold it from underneath them. Sam was so distraught, he lost it, the last thing of his family and his childhood home. He also begged the judge for a longer sentence, as Lindley Renick was sentenced to only 16 years all in all for taking her husband's life, 13 years for second-degree murder, and 3 years for armed criminal action. Personally, I think she should have been sentenced to life, but that's not my job to say. I hope she gets comfy, because I'm not going to lie, it's not going to be an easy ride for her. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments. Do you think that she killed her husband? Do you think that Michael did it? Because personally, I do think that she did it. Remember to stay kind, stay beautiful, and cake it till you make it. I'll see you in the next one.